Hello, and welcome to the Critical Path Institute podcast. Our goal for this podcast is to connect the dots among our core competencies in regulatory science, biomarkers, data management and standards, clinical outcome assessments, and modeling and analytics, and how we accelerate drug development. C-Path created this podcast for researchers, clinicians, and industry and regulatory professionals with the hope that these conversations and the resources we share will advance your efforts and partnerships to improve global health.
Welcome, everybody. Here we are again at the C-Path podcast, Connecting the Dots. I'm Klaus Romero, Chief Executive for Critical Path Institute, and today I'm with two of our leaders that represent one of our core competencies, Ramona Walls and Rick Liwski. So let's start with having you guys introduce yourselves and share your title, but more important, what that means.
Sure. Thanks, Klaus. I am the director of the Data Collaboration Center, which, for ease of saying, we refer to as the DCC. So the Data Collaboration Center is, to me, really the center of all of the work that C-Path does. I would say it's because without data, none of the other work that we could happen. Second only to the patients, the people with lived experience. They're really the center of everything we do. But beyond that, data has to be the background, the driving force of all decisions and all tools created at C-Path. So the Data Collaboration Center is the team at C-Path who brings in the data, double checks it that it's the right thing, standardizes it, integrates it with other data sets, and then builds a platform and other tools for sharing it, both within the departments and consortia in C-Path, but also with external users.
And I'm Rick Liwski. I'm the Chief Technology Officer, and the CTO position encompasses the Data Collaboration Center, but also covers the infrastructure, data privacy, data security, and tries to make sure everything is in compliance to support all the DCC deliverables and activities.
Fantastic. So let's dive a little bit deeper into a couple of things that you both mentioned. Let's start with Ramona. You said something that is very critical for our mission, that links transforming data into insights and solutions. And so you definitely work with the foundation for pretty much everything we do. Can you talk a little bit about the types of data that the DCC integrates and handles?
At this point, it's essentially every type of data. We're trying to understand a full picture of a person who has a disease or is living with a disease or who doesn't have a disease. And in order to do that, we need to understand how they feel, function, and survive. So we need to know a lot about them. It used to be that drug development and other work was kind of tied to specific measurements that you could take of a person, lab results, questionnaires that you could ask them. But in today's landscape, we have so many different types of data available to us. We have image data through MRIs, X-rays, any type of imaging. We have digital data coming in through devices such as accelerometers that are measuring how people move. We have still questionnaire data that's very important, coming from getting that person's perspective about how they feel and how they're responding to their life and to treatments. Oh, so many other kinds of data. We have
Preclinical data. We have
So preclinical data, which is data about animals and other organisms that are useful for designing medicines and trials for patients. Rick, do you want to talk about other data types?
Omics. We've dealt
Yes,
with
of
omics
course,
data
yeah.
and tuberculosis. Yeah, and interestingly, I think the history of the DCC, we focused for the first 10 years or so on primarily clinical data and preclinical data, and which tends to come into C-Path with pretty high quality, and so we were able to utilize that pretty quickly and develop models and whatever. But more recently, over say the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of the data that we've received has been much less structured, much less quality coming in, but we're like imaging data, like EHR data, digital device data, And so over the last several years, the greatest challenge I think that we face is trying to make sense of that data and trying to make sense of it quickly, trying to enhance its quality so that it can be used by researchers to develop drug development tools, models, or whatever.
And I think what you brought up about EHR data is a great point. So that's electronic health record data. This is data coming from point of care being measured on people. And even though it's much less controlled, so the data are in a way lower quality or at least messier and less standardized, it's presenting this opportunity because there are literally millions, billions of data points out there now. So every time you visit a doctor or you're checked into the hospital or you take a medication, pick it up from your pharmacy, there's a record created of that. And so imagine the potential for understanding a full day-to-day life of a person with a disease or with a condition that you're trying to develop some tool for.
Yeah, fantastic, because that you covered a lot of ground with the types of data that the DCC handles, and Rick covered some of the data sources because they come from either clinical trials from pharmaceutical companies or observational studies from universities or patient registries from patient groups, or, like Ramona mentioned, electronic health records. But let's dive a little bit deeper into the day-to-day. So we have a unique ability to receive those data from all those contributors, and there's a key to that success that I'd like Rick to cover. But then, Ramona, if you can walk us through the process itself, from getting the data in to having the data curated and integrated in a way that can be analyzed properly.
Okay, so starting with how we get data into C-Path, which is quite honestly one of the biggest challenges we face, is just first finding the data that we need in order to fulfill our research goals. Second is trying to convince and negotiate with the owners of that data to contribute it for the purposes that we are trying to achieve. And then the actual logistics of transferring that data securely, storing that data. We have to complete a data contribution agreement to make sure we understand all the requirements that the contributor is placing on that data. And in our framework, the contributor controls how their data is used, who it can be shared with, how long we can use it, and we ensure that we comply with all regulatory requirements. We follow security best practices. The contributor can state whether the data can be shared just with C-Path or whether it can be shared with a particular group of consortium members or researchers, or whether it can be shared more broadly, like our rare disease program. The goal there is to share the data as broadly as possible, but that puts a burden on us to make sure that we're sharing it properly, that we're complying with GDPR, the General Data Protection requirements under the EU, or HIPAA requirements in the US. So the processes that we put in place are there to ensure that we're handling that data properly, that we're proper stewards of the data for the contributor, and we've spent a lot of time building up trust with those contributors to make sure that they're comfortable sharing the data and they're comfortable with what we do with that data.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, the DCC, I think, does something that very few departments around the world do, which is once we get that data in and before we share it out to others who would like to use it, we go through an extensive data management and curation process from start to finish. So that includes, once the data are received, making sure that it does not contain any protected health information or personal information, making sure that it's the data that we're supposed to be receiving, so a kind of basic QC check, then going through that very arduous process of making the data as usable and understandable as possible. So we're really guided by the FAIR data principles of making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So, and how we do that is based on the curation flows that we use. Those may be different for different types of data, but all of them are really driven by the need for trust, transparency, and traceability in data.
Yeah, thank you, Ramona. That's a really important point about the FAIR principles. But then I think that links to the practical application of certain disciplines that I'd like you to comment on for the audience in as their definition, their differences, but how they interact together. One is data management, the other one is data engineering, and the other one is data science. Can you elaborate on those three?
Sure, yeah. So I will start with data science because that is kind of the foundational tooling that we build within C-Path. So the data science team is the data science team is responsible for figuring out how to manage and curate the data. Not so much the day-to-day work, but what are the technological and scientific pieces that we can use to make data more fair. So the data science here is really doing things like figuring out how to include AI into our workflows for management and curation. Same thing with the data engineering team. So the data engineering is really building those toolings. They're in a way very similar to software engineers, except the software that they're building is focused on how to best handle data and how to do it the most efficiently, and how to build in those pieces of traceability and trust into your process. So how can we make sure that everything that happens to a datum from the moment it enters C-Path's care until the moment it's reused or in an application, that we know all of that has happened. And the data managers are essentially the boots on the ground. They're the ones that have this really unique skill set and knowledge to interpret data that often is not that clear. So they might get a data table that has a column called FV2. Well, what does that mean, right? And if they haven't been supplied with a data dictionary, which sometimes is the case, they need to go back and forth, work with the contributor, and make sure they're understanding what's coming in, make sure they know what's there, and they do that. They are essentially that human in the loop that makes sure that the data are interpreted correctly and brought together correctly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ramona. Now, Rick, you were instrumental in building the data and analytics platform that allows for the three disciplines that Ramona explained to be able to function and happen. Can you comment on the journey to get the platform established and how many data points the current platform has and what we're looking to integrate further into the platform?
Yeah, sure. And maybe a little bit of history here. We've been running a data platform since I think about 2010, so 15 years now. And our original platform, the primary goal was to hold data that we were able to acquire for primarily our own internal research purposes. We would use that data to build models or clinical trial simulation tools. But more and more, as over the years, we have found so much value in that data that one of our primary goals is to make that data available not only to C-Path but to external researchers, whether that be consortium members participating in various consortia within C-Path, but like in a rare disease platform with external researchers, because we want that data to be used as widely and broadly as possible. To achieve that, we had to enhance our data platform to not only store data properly, but we had to provide tools to researchers to be able to analyze that data. We had to make sure it was secure. So we went through several iterations of our original platform to try to make it more accessible, but the data was never truly fair. It was very hard to find the data. It was very hard. C-Path had to extract that data for research purposes. The researchers couldn't do a lot of that work on their own. So with the latest platform, the Data and Analytics Platform, or DAP, what we've done is we've built in a lot of those tools into the platform itself, and we've focused, like Ramona was talking about, on the fair data principles. So a lot of effort has gone into making sure that we can provide a metadata catalog and a summarized data summaries that researchers can quickly find what they're looking for, request the specific data sets that they want to perform their research, and then access that data in a secure workspace. In some cases, we allow researchers to download that data, but in a lot of cases, in order to comply with privacy regulations, they have to perform the research within a secure research environment. So we have to make sure that the tools are there to provide them with everything they need to perform that research. So it's taken, I think we started with our latest platform around 2018, started to design it. We actually launched in 2020, I believe, or maybe late
Well, we started working on it. Yeah, we launched it in 2021.
2021.
Early 2021.
So we're now 4 years into it. We have, across all of C-Path, we have, I think, over 450 studies, over 700,000 patients worth of data spread across the various platforms. And then more recently, like I mentioned before, a lot of that used to be primarily clinical trial data. More recently, we've gotten a wealth of data from primarily EHR and registries that have really exploded the amount of data that we've had to manage and handle within C-Path.
Fantastic. Now, for the audience, you've seen how we're connecting the dots from data disciplines to actual data integration, which is something that to many people seems like an insurmountable challenge, but we have met that challenge and risen to the occasion. But now let's talk about tangible examples of impact and how the different data resources and solutions have enabled not only the building of solutions, but the resource itself allowing for the generation of external controls in certain cases, and some of the gains of insights that can help accelerate drug development. Ramona, do you want to start with some of those examples?
Yeah, so the data within C-Path has been used for creating multiple drug development tools for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, for infant neonatal diseases, for Friedreich's ataxia, many different diseases, kidney diseases, Parkinson's, Huntington, and again, all of those tools that have been built would not be possible to do any of those with a single data set. So really what's the role of the DCC in that has been to bring the data together and integrate it into these much larger aggregated data sets that can be used to build trustworthy tools.
Yeah, and Rick, do you want to comment on the importance of these data integration efforts for really challenging areas like rare and orphan diseases?
Yeah, so one of the big challenges, of course, with rare and orphan diseases is there's not a lot of patients out there with any particular disease, so there aren't many there's not a lot of clinical trial data available because there just aren't enough subjects to perform a clinical trial, or the pool of subjects is so small. So by integrating data, by acquiring and integrating data across several different rare disease areas, we're able to build up a much larger repository, a much larger wealth of data that we can look for patterns across. We can look for potential similarities across diseases that can potentially lead to cures. One other thing I wanted to add, that I recall one of the early meetings I had on Alzheimer's disease, one of the researchers talking about how they had developed a model, I believe, but it had taken them almost 5 years to acquire all the data sets that they needed. They had to go through individual negotiations with all the different contributors. They defined the data. Then when they got it, it was just in its raw format. They had to perform their own quality checks and QCs. And one of the great things that we bring to the research community is we do all that work for them. So when they access one of our data sets, they already have several data sets available for a particular therapeutic area. It's already been curated. It's already been standardized to a common format, so they can hit the ground running when they perform the research and not spend 2, 3, 4 years just trying to acquire, curate, and do all that work themselves. We do it on their behalf.
Yeah, I also wanted to touch on one of the points you made about comparing data, bringing data in from multiple diseases, and I think in rare diseases this is a particularly useful aspect of sharing data in a neutral place like C-Path, because again, there is so little known about each individual disease. With modern tooling, with modern data science methods, we can actually annotate data with standardized terminology for something called an ontology, and we can use the ontologies to really link data across diseases. They provide this semantic structure that allows us to understand how something that's happening, whether it's a genomic or genetic effect, whether it's phenotypic similarity, whether it's drugs, how they're impacting that disease. We can connect the sparse data points within one disease to a whole family of diseases, and all of that external data that already exists that really helps inform us and to better understand the broader picture of an individual rare disease.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, because at the end of the day, when a solution is built, a drug development tool is built, in the regulatory review process for the tools, we transparently submit the data that were used to build the tool to the regulators, and they have full access to reproduce the analyses that were done. But now let's talk about the future. And so, Rick, if you can comment on the envisioned future of the data platform, and then Ramona, if you can comment on the future of the core competency that the DCC represents for C-Path.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things that's become apparent over the last several years is this notion that there will be one single data platform to rule them all, that all the data gets integrated and sent to one common place is not going to happen. It's not in the future. So I think one of the big aspects of for the future of the data platform and for data collaboration is the ability for all these platforms to work together to support federated access to data, federated searching of data, federated analysis of data. So there's a lot of work going in that area. And of course, the other big one is artificial intelligence and machine languages, large language models to interpret that data to perform the analysis. But that's used not only across the research community, it's used within our own teams to make our processing of the data more efficient, to make our programming more efficient, to make our searches for data sets of that are usable more efficient. So I think the AI integration is going to be a big part of the wave of the future.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I think this is really an exciting time to be working in a department like the DCC, because not only is there a ton of data being generated right now and being stored and being accessible, but there's a recognition in society in whole of the value of that data and what it can be used for. So, and even a third point, there are tools being developed to finally make use of those data. So the AI, large language models that Rick mentioned, that's one application. Even the ability to do use more traditional methods, but the computational power to access things and analyze data that before would have been intractable. So I would say I love, but simultaneously loathe or fear the work in the data science team and the data collaboration center and the data management work, because it's definitely a place where you have to run to standstill. Things are changing very quickly. That makes it very exciting to always see. We talk within my team on a regular basis about not being able to predict what the methods and tooling that we're going to be using in 5 years will be. And I think that's super. I think it's fun because we're going to find answers to things that we can't solve now. That's where it's.
Or
really,
even knowing what kind of data we're going to be receiving in another year or
that's
two,
right.
and
Yep.
how we're going to handle it.
What will be the new data type?
Yeah, always driven by the need to turn the data into solutions that can move the needle to accelerate drug development. And you're right. I mean, with the way and the pace at which medical product development is evolving, the data needs and the demands for different tools is certainly changing. And I'm glad we have you at the helm to drive the next generation of tools that are going to make a difference in accelerating drug development and facilitating regulatory reviews. So I think we had a fantastic conversation today. There will be more discussions in the future about specific aspects of the transformation of data into insights. But you guys provided the audience with a really awesome overview of, like I said, one of our foundational key core competencies that drive C-Path success. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Klaus.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy this episode? Share it with a friend or colleague, or leave a review on iTunes, and help others discover and support our mission. We are welcoming guests with a range of experiences and viewpoints. The views expressed belong to the guests themselves. Learn more about Critical Path Institute at cpath.org. That's c-path.org. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon, and thanks for listening.